Well, today is June 27th, 2021. It's hard to believe that we're halfway through this year. Of course, last year we know was a year that we all sort of, I'm sure, want to forget. And it's just so strange that I try to think of things that happened last year, and so many of the things you can't even remember. It was such an odd time. And when things are getting better, they're still not perfect. We're still in the middle of this pandemic, although hopefully we're on the far down the downhill slide of this. Most people have now had the opportunity to be vaccinated. Most people have been vaccinated in our country at least, and it's making a huge difference in our fight against the pandemic. Now, instead of thousands of people each day in the country dying, we're down to just a few hundred. Actually, we've been averaging fewer than 300 a day in the United States, so that is great news. But we still occasionally get reminders of how this pandemic is continuing and how it affects our lives. We were able to attend the College World Series for a couple of days this past week, and there was a very sad story that came out of that. We're Vanderbilt fans, and we saw Vanderbilt play on Friday against North Carolina State, but their team didn't have all their players because some had tested positive for the coronavirus. And then after the game, they found that several other members of the team had tested positive, and they had to be disqualified from continuing in the College World Series. And so we've had this same thing happen over the last year and a half in various types of activities that have had to be canceled. Of course, it's great for Vanderbilt because they move on to the finals, which is this coming week, but sad for those North Carolina State players that really worked hard to get where they got, and then to have it all end because of a disease like this was very, very sad. We're going to talk today about something that's always timely, I think, and it's really my favorite story probably of all of the parables at least, although I don't know, the prodigal son's right up there too, but the story of the Good Samaritan. We're going to be talking about that today and about our neighbors and how we treat our neighbors and just the way we live with each other. In this time of pandemic, it's been very difficult. We've had all these rules we've been had to live by, and so many of them affect our relationships with each other and with our neighbors. I mean, there have been periods of time here where you were told you had to stay in your apartments, that you couldn't even go out and see the people in the apartment next to you. Your very closest neighbors, let alone the neighbors from other parts of town that were not allowed to come and visit. And we've just had all this period of isolation where we were not able to be with our neighbors and our friends and our family. But it brings to mind the story that comes from the Bible in this parable of the Good Samaritan as to who is our neighbor. And I think this story, like I say, is always timely. And I'm just going to read the text here from Luke chapter 10. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him. Of course, it's always a lawyer that's causing trouble, you know that. Saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said to him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answered and said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, with all thy strength, and all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and you'll live. But he, the lawyer, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered and said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his clothes, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way. And when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. And he went to him, and he bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out money, and gave it to the host, and said, Take care of him, and whatever you spend, if it's more than what I've given you, when I come again, I will pay you. And Jesus said, Now which of these three thinkest thou was a neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, he that showed mercy on him. And Jesus said unto him, go and do likewise. Now think about this story. It's sort of to set the stage for it, we have to think in terms of the relationship between the Jews and the Samaritans. Jerusalem was just a few miles from Jericho, but ideologically it was a huge distance away. The people of Samaria were only partly Jewish. They were not full-blooded Jews, so they were not accepted by the Jews. They were looked down on as some sort of a half-breed or whatever. And the Samaritans, they worshipped at Mount Gerizim, whereas the Jews, of course, worshipped at Jerusalem. And the Jews would just not have anything to do with the Samaritans. You know, we know another story about a Samaritan that Jesus tells us, and that's about the Samaritan woman he met at the well. And if you recall, she was shocked that Jesus would even talk to her, let alone tell her the things that he did. But that was because of this relationship between the Jews and the Samaritans. So that adds to the story when you think in terms of this lawyer asked Jesus, who's my neighbor? And he tells about this fellow that's on the road to Jericho, which was a very dangerous road. There were often problems there. People were attacked, whatever. There were just several opportunities there for bandits or robbers or just in general bad people to hide out and attack folks that were on that road. It's often called the way of blood. It was sort of considered to be a bloody road. So Jesus sets the story here with this fellow that's going along this path. And, you know, we have to assume, the story doesn't tell us this, but the fellow was probably Jewish. That makes the story make a lot more sense, that the one that was injured, he's on his way, and he gets attacked, and he gets beaten, and he's stolen. They stole his money. They took everything he had. They left him, took his clothes even, and left him half dead, we're told. And then some folks come along the way. Now, you know, we would think that if you had to have somebody that came by when you were in distress, let's say you've broken down in your car, it's late at night, it's raining perhaps, and you're on the side of the road, and you're out in the middle of nowhere, and you've got your flashing lights on, you're outside trying to figure out what to do, looking at your car. Well, who would you want to come by at that point? You know, who would you want to come by? I mean, we could think of a lot of folks, maybe a police officer or someone who would be more likely to stop. But in this story, the way it was set, where it was along this path, Jesus told the story that the first person that came along was a priest. Well, you'd think if you were in need and lying by the side of the road, had been beat up, and a priest came along, you know, it's broad daylight. It's not like out by the side of your car when you have car trouble. He comes there, and you think, I've got a really good chance of getting some help from this priest. But what did the priest do? He went on the other side. He went around. Have we ever gone around somebody that we saw in trouble? Have we ever seen someone in need and we said, oh, we don't want to go that way. We're going to go this way. And we do everything we can to avoid it, maybe because we might be expected to do something sometimes. I know my wife is a nurse practitioner, and I know that in the many years we've been married, I've seen so many situations where we're at a ball game or we're out at a shopping mall or whatever, and someone has trouble. Someone has a physical problem. It looks like they're having some sort of an attack or they fall or whatever, and she's always the first one there to try to help them. And, you know, I would like her to be the one to come along if I was the one that was beat on the side of the road. But the priest didn't do much, did he? The priest didn't do it. He kept going. Well, you know, the priests were all of the tribe of Levi. They're all Levites. Now, all priests are Levites, but not all Levites are priests. So the way Jesus tells the story, he has someone else from this tribe, the tribe of Levi, that comes next. Now you say, well, the priest didn't stop and help him. Maybe he had somewhere more important to be. Maybe his synagogue was waiting for him and he just didn't have time. We know the Levite's going to stop and help. But the Levite does the same thing, goes on the other side of the road, goes around, leaves that poor man half dead, bloody, naked on the side of the road. Well, you know, the lawyer's probably getting offended when he's hearing this story. He's thinking, well, those people should have stopped. What's the problem here? He doesn't understand the point Jesus is about to make. But then the next person that came along was the Samaritan. a Samaritan, the one they all looked down on. The Samaritan that they didn't think was worthy of being a God lover because they were not full Jews. But this Samaritan came along, and he saw the man lying on the side of the road, naked and in need, and he stopped. He may have had somewhere else important to go, we don't know. But he stopped because he thought this was the most important thing for him to do at that time. He tended to the man's wounds. He put him on his own animal, took him back to an inn close by where there was an innkeeper to help take care of him. He dealt with his wounds with oil and wine. He put clothes on him. And then he gave money to the innkeeper and said, you take care of this man till he's well and able to go on his way. And if I haven't left you enough money today, I'll be back and I'll pay you whatever it takes to take care of him. How many of us are like that Samaritan? It's hard, isn't it? Sometimes it's hard. We always have somewhere that maybe we're in a hurry. We've got something more important. Or maybe there's someone else that we think needs us more than someone we see that's clearly in need along life's way. And we all see it. You know, all of us see it, whether it's you see someone that's fallen down and having trouble getting up, or someone that's confused maybe about where they are. They're somehow disoriented because of whatever situation. We see people that suffer in so many ways and need. We see people that have financial needs sometimes, people that maybe are close to us and that really need just a little encouragement, a little help sometimes. But it's always easier to be like that priest and that Levite and go the other way. But Jesus told this story because of the importance of how we're to deal with each other. Now, if we were telling this story today in a group of Christians, we could have told the story that it was a Christian that was lying there, and that a minister went by, and then a bishop went by and did nothing, and then perhaps a Muslim came by. That would sort of fit our story, wouldn't it? A different religion, a different group, but the one that stopped and helped. But we don't want to be like that priest and like that Levite. We want to be like the Samaritan. And we all of us, here at Park Place or anywhere else, we all have opportunities to help our neighbors. All of us need help from time to time. There's not anyone in this room that hasn't at some point in your life been stranded somewhere and had a problem in trying to get somewhere you needed to go, and someone had to stop and help you. I guarantee you.
John, I just wanted to bring this out. My son had a motorcycle accident and laid in the road covered in gasoline. Cars kept going by. This was out kind of a country road. And all of a sudden this young man stopped, came over, put something under his head. Scott couldn't breathe because he had 6 broken ribs and a punctured lung. And he put rolled something under his head, gave him some water, called the sheriff's department and called 911.
And he lived through it, right?
And he lived through it.
That's a great story.
That's a good Samaritan.
That is a good Samaritan. And I would imagine that all of us have had people that have helped us at some point along the way. I know that my wife and I both sometimes, in the past, not recently, but in the past, we've sometimes had problems in knowing how much gasoline was in our vehicles. We've sometimes thought we could go just a little bit further than we were actually able to go. We've both, unfortunately, not recently, of course, but in our distant past, we both have had opportunities for people to help us. And we always got the help. We always got the help. One of my favorite stories is when I was coming back from Florida a few years ago, and it was the night before Palm Sunday, and I was trying to get back here for the service here at Park Place, and I was driving late at night, and I was going through Alabama, coming up from Florida. I was going through Alabama, and near Huntsville, I saw that I was getting a little low on gas, and this was a vehicle that I had not had very long, and I didn't know that much about the gas gauge. And typically if I have a car, I know how many miles it'll go after it says 0 miles to empty. But this one, I didn't know that quite yet. And so I think, well, here's Huntsville. It'll be easy to find a place to get gas at Huntsville. Well, the way the interstate goes around Huntsville, there are no gas stations. And so I'm just out in the middle of nowhere, and I feel the car starting to miss. And fortunately, I'm at an exit ramp. I see an exit ramp. I'm able to coast off the interstate on this little country road out in the middle of Alabama. I see one house, and I'm thinking, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. If I go knock on the door of that house, what's likely to happen to me? Yeah, not good things, I was thinking. So I stood there and I thought about it, and there was no one in sight anywhere around. And I prayed a little. I need some help, God. I got to get back home. And along about then, a group of teenagers came along that had been to a midnight movie. They said it was lucky for me they went to the midnight movie. They'd meant to go at 10 and were running late, so they went to the midnight movie. That's why they were out there at 2 in the morning. And they took me to buy gas, and then this car it was one of these, now cars, you can't just put gas in them. You got to have a little tool to stick down in the tank. And I had no idea how to do that. And one of these fellows worked at a garage. He said, I've seen this before. So they put the gas in the car for me, and I was able to go on my way on the road. But those were good Samaritans. And we've all benefited like that. So but I love that story because of just the timing of it all, and the fact that them being late to a movie saved me on the side of the road. I was able to get on the road, but that's a minor thing, running out of gas. Not like being beat up, not like the situation that Carol talked about, her son having an accident, being lying in a ditch with gasoline all over him. Those are some very serious situations. There was a study done. I find this somewhat fascinating. You can find it on the internet if you want to Google the story. It's a 1973 study at Princeton University at the Divinity School. They decided to put this story to the test, the story of the Good Samaritan. And what they did was they had a group of divinity students, and these are people studying to be like the priest. They're studying to be worship leaders and men of God, and they're going to be religious people. And so they decided, let's just see how the story of the Good Samaritan plays with them. Now, to add to it, these 3 groups of students, like there were, maybe 10 in each group, they were told to prepare a lesson on the Good Samaritan that they were going to deliver when they reached the destination they were told to go to. And they set it up so some of them were told, you have to do this, they're waiting for you now. You have to, as soon as you get there, you've got to deliver this message on the Good Samaritan. Some others, they said, you've got a little time. When you get there, you have about 30 minutes to prepare. And then the third group didn't know exactly what was ahead of them. They just knew they were told to go to this place, but they had been studying the Good Samaritan. So what they did was then they had somebody lying out on the sidewalk, bloody, half-dressed, that looked like they'd just been attacked. Now, what did these students do when they passed? Really interesting. 63% that were in that early condition when they had plenty of time, they weren't in a hurry to get to this sermon they were supposed to deliver. 63% stopped to help the person. 43% of the people that were just barely going to get there on time stopped to help the person. And then 10% of those people that they said they were waiting for them to deliver the message, only 10% of them stopped to help the stranger. Now think about that. Even in the best case, 37% of these students, 37% didn't stop to help at all. And then in the worst case, those that were in a hurry because there was some message they were supposed to deliver, 90% of them passed by. I think there's a lesson here to be learned, is that, we can talk religion, we can study religion, we can study the Bible, but it's all about how we live it, isn't it? And these very people, it reminded me so much of the priests and the Levites. It was sort of the same thing. Maybe they felt they were in a hurry to get somewhere. Maybe they just didn't have time. Maybe they thought someone was waiting for them. What happens if a minister's on his way to church and sees someone in need, but it's almost time for the service to start? Well, in this case, we would find that if these numbers held true, only 10% would stop and help. That's a sad indictment of us, isn't it? So I think that when you look at this study and you look at this story, I think the lesson for us is that when we see someone in need, they are our neighbor, and we need to stop and help them, maybe before these other things, and we've got to have faith that these other things will work themselves out. You know, if you're 30 minutes late to church because you stopped to help someone, somebody else will pick up the slack. They'll figure a way to make it work without you. You know, nobody's that indispensable, but you may be indispensable to that person that needs help there on the side of the road. You know, when we talk about who are our neighbors, you know, you think about the person that lives in the apartment next to you, or you think about the person that lives in the house next to you, or that lives in the same city, or lives in the same state, or even the same country. But I think the point of the story Jesus is making here, that we're all neighbors. That all of us are God's children, and we're all neighbors, and we all need to be looking for ways to help others. And I just believe that this story of the Good Samaritan so captures what we need to strive for as Christians in our relationship with others. If people don't see us act like that Good Samaritan acted, are they going to want any part of what we believe in our religion? Because it's the way we act, not the way we talk, that controls people's opinions of us. So I think that in the coming weeks, that each of us, when we see an opportunity to someone in need, let's try to find a way to help them. I mean, I know there are lots of factors involved, but if we can reasonably help, we should, because I think that's what God would expect of us, and you know, that's what Jesus taught all through his ministry. So that's the story of the Good Samaritan. Let's all try to be good neighbors in the coming weeks. That's our lesson for today. We're going to end with a prayer, as we always do. Dear God, thank you for this day, and thank you for Jesus. Dear God, thank you for Jesus and the things he taught us. Thank you for the story of the Good Samaritan, and thank you for Jesus helping teach us the things that are important and the things that you expect of us, God, that the things you expect of us and the way we treat our brothers and sisters. Dear God, thank you also for the deliverance from this pandemic to the point that we've reached now, that we're seemingly doing so much better. And just, dear God, we ask that we continue to improve this situation, that soon all things can be back at least as normal as they can be after the pandemic. Thank you for being our God. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Stay safe.